You may be seated as we read our scripture. Our first reading, lesson 1, is from the book of Acts of the Apostles, chapter 17. Then Paul stood in front of the Areopagus and said, Athenians, I see how religious you are in every way. For as I went through the city and looked carefully at the objects we worship, I found among them an altar with the inscription, to an unknown God. What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it, he who is Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in shrines made of human hands, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives all mortals life and breath and all things. From one ancestor he made all nations to inhabit the whole earth, and he allotted the times of their existence and the boundaries of the places where they would live, so that they would search for God and perhaps grope for him and find him, though indeed he is not far from each of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as even some of your own poets have said, for we too are his offspring. Since we are God's offspring, we ought not to think that the deity is like gold or silver or stone, an image formed by the art and the imagination of mortals. While God has overlooked the times of human ignorance, now he commands that all people everywhere to repent. Because he has fixed the day on which he will have the world judged in righteousness by a man whom he has appointed, and this he has given assurance to all by raising him from the dead. Our gospel reading today is from John chapter 14. If you love me, you will keep my commandments. And I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to be with you forever. This is the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive, because it neither sees him nor knows him. You know him, because he abides in you, and he will be in you. I will not leave you orphaned. I am coming to you. In a little while the world will see me no longer. But you will see, because I live, you also will live. On that day you will know that I am thy Father, and you in me, and I in you. They who have my commandments and keep them are those who love me, and those who love me will be loved by my Father, and I will love them and reveal myself to them. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Sometimes they're called sea turtles. They're loggerhead turtles. They have an interesting way of propagating, of having their young. They crawl up on the sand beaches and lay their eggs. And when the eggs are hatched, the little turtles work their way out of the sand, and they work their way to the water. They have an instinct in them to work their way to the water, because if they don't, they're not going to live. They can live for over 100 years and weigh 600 pounds, but if they never make it to the ocean, they don't live at all. Unfortunately for many of the turtles, they find a moat or a little dip in the sand dune where there's some water and they stop there. Or they find someone who's made a huge sandcastle with a moat around it, and they swim around in circles in those very small places, and they can't grow, and they die. They perish heading for that water they so desperately need. Most folks have an idea of religion as a thing that you do in order to get to heaven. And that's an obstacle sometimes. Because you see, religion, believing in Jesus Christ, professing Him as Savior, is a way to get to heaven. But it's not the only reason you go to church. And it's not even necessarily the first thing you do when you walk inside our church. You know, sandcastles carelessly take the times of the sea turtles and keep them from getting where they really want to be. Sometimes the things we do in churches, sometimes the things we get caught up in churches do the same. We work laboriously and never get to the main thing. And the main thing of a church is to bring people to Jesus Christ and let them know thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. To let them know that salvation, but them to live as though that salvation is already there, because it is. Now Paul went, I'm talking about the book of Acts. Paul went to Athens. And he got to that place in the Athenian hill where they had all these statues for gods and little figurines and everything. And he walked around, and I can just kind of see Paul walking around it, and he sees that one that says to the unknown God. And he starts a sort of a conversation with him, and they take him to the Areopagus. The Areopagus is an interesting place on that hill. It's Mars Hill. The Areopagus is both where you discuss everything. It's also where a judge will judge you and tell you to, quote, drink the hemlock if they have to. Very important place. So Paul goes to the Areopagus to have this discussion with them. But what was Paul trying to do? Paul sought an approach to share the gospel with the people of Athens, to share the good news. For he saw in the midst of where he was, they were very interested in knowing about their future. They were very interested in knowing about what was out there. We in the world today need to seek an approach to share the good news with our neighbors. And guess what? They used to have these publications, and they still exist. Excuse me. They still exist. They're called chick publications. Now, I don't mean anything ugly about that. It's what they are. They're cartoons that are gospel tracts that tell people how to be saved. They're very direct. They're very entertaining sometimes. But at any rate, they don't always get across to people. They don't want to see them. Somehow I always think that things that are left on a urinal ledger in a bathroom is not the way to share Jesus Christ. You know, I mean, that's where men find him. You go certain places. That's just not how you share Jesus Christ. We have to have an approach to share Christ with the world. One of the most important things we have to know today is how to rebuild our churches, how to build our churches with people that are looking to see Christ. And we can have some lessons from this particular set of verses that teach us to effectively share the good news of Jesus Christ. What can we learn from that Athenian encounter? Let's talk about the lessons. Lesson 1, begin where the people are. One of the biggest failures of the church today is we don't begin where people are. We want to take them to where we are and say, I've got you captive, now I'm going to tell you what to do. Let's look at Paul for a minute. He repeats the verses. Then Paul stood in front of the Areopagus and said, Athenians, I see how extremely religious you are in every way. I love the King James Version because it says, I see that you are very superstitious, is what the King James says. For I went to the city and looked carefully at the object of worship, and I found an altar among them with the inscription to an unknown God. And then he says in the New Revised Standard, what therefore you worship as unknown, I proclaim to you. And what he says in King James, that version, is what you worship in ignorance, I present to you. I think a lot of people worship a lot of things in ignorance. People who begin where people are have 3 characteristics I want to talk about today. The first one is they show interest in their lives. You ever think about it when somebody knocks on the door like I was taught in my early days of seminary and say, oh, I'm so-and-so, I'm the pastor of this church, I want to tell you how to be saved, okay? I mean, somehow, that person doesn't think you're very interested in them. If you want permission to share Christ with someone, you have to show an interest in them. You maybe have to know whether or not where they work, or whether they have any children, or whether they have a relationship. even whether they like motorcycles, okay, or have one. All of these different things. You show an interest in what their lives are about. You know, you show an interest in what they do. If you want people to be open to the gospel of Jesus Christ, you have to be open to know who they are. It's not a magical thing that people just get captivated. And then, after you know who they are, you need to seek to understand their feelings. There are many people that have a lot of hurts in life. There are people who have different interests than you do. One of the problems in our country today is we are not interested in the feelings of anybody else other than ourselves. That's hyperbole, I know. But it's where we are now. It's where churches are. It's why churches divide. It's why we fight all the time. We need to seek to understand the feelings of others outside of the institutional setting. But what is it that makes you hurt? What is it that makes you cry? What is it that makes you laugh? What is it that turns your life on? What is it that you live for every day? Show that genuine interest in who somebody is and what they are. Sometimes I like to get to know people. I really do. And what really makes them who they are. And when you do that, if you show interest in their lives and understand their feelings, then you make a genuine connection with them. They think, this person is real. He really cares whether or not I'm hurting or not. He or she really cares about my children, is really interested in them. They have me in mind. And then, when the opportunity comes to talk about something, it's there. I want to give you a story of a picturesque Italian town, village, whatever they call them now. It had a big cathedral, a Catholic cathedral. The most beautiful place you would ever see. And the way they kept the cathedral open is they got tourists like us, if you go to Italy, and they charge you an admission to go and tour the cathedral. Because they didn't have many people there on Sunday morning at all. Well, they sent a new rector to the cathedral, because even Catholic priests are called rectors when they're at the cathedral. And the new rector was young, and he walked in, and somehow nobody had warned him that what he was going to pastor was a museum and not a church. Well, he got up there the first Sunday morning and climbed up into it amidst all that beautiful stuff, and he had 17 people present at his main service. Now, 17 here is good, but 17 in a 1,000-seater is bad. Believe me, I know what 17 looks like in a 200-seater, and I tell you, it's really got to look bad in a 2,000-seater. He got up there, and he didn't know what to do, and finally he decided that we need a change here. So what he asked the people who were the leader of the church, he said, let's build a new church building. And at first they said, what do you mean? He said, I mean what I said. Let's build a new church building. One of the guys said, oh, I'll help you build it. And the other one said, well, I own the cinder block company. I'll help you build it. And first thing you know, they built an ugly cinder block structure at the end of the road. They still supported the church by having tours in the cathedral, but they had a little cinder block building, probably about the size of this one, and the 17 people went over to the church. This is a true story. 17 people went there. And over a period of time, that 17 grew to 30, and it grew to about 200 when it peaked out. They were happy, and they were glorious, and they did a little interview with Pew Research a few years later. They said, what was the difference between a cathedral and your cinder block building? He said, real easy. The cinder block, the cathedral was built for a group of people that no longer exist. The cinder block building was built for us, and we love Jesus, and we do the sacrament in the cinder block building. We have to meet people where they are. We have to be interested in who they are, and we have to make churches for where they are. That's the first lesson. The second lesson is we need to talk about God, not about social issues, okay? We need to talk about God. Because God, if you've got to teach people about God, because you can't teach about social issues unless you teach about God. And I'll tell you another thing. I believe in the literal nature of the Bible. But you see this book? This is not God. This book tells me about God, but this book is not God. All right? So we need to talk about God. The verses I want to emphasize here. The God who made the world and everything in it, He is the Lord of heaven and earth. Does not live enshrined by human hands, nor is he served by human hands, as though he needed anything. Since he himself gives mortals life and breath and all things, from one ancestor has made all nations inhabit the whole earth, He allotted times of their existence and boundaries and the places they would live, so that they would search for God, perhaps grow for him and find him, though indeed he is not far from each of us. In him we live and move and have our being. Even some of your own poets have said, for we too are his offspring. The world hungers for an understanding of God. And they don't want to see your commandments before you tell them about God. They don't want to see whether or not you believe in infant baptism or baptism by immersion, or you believe in speaking in tongues or don't believe in speaking in tongues, and on it goes. Tell them about God. Because the world hungers for an understanding of the unknown. It is frightening to people to think about God. It is frightening to see that there's something unknown out there that's more powerful than we are, and we need to tell them about God. I know a God who created the heavens and earth. I know a God who makes my body work. I know a God who loves me. I know a God who takes care of me. It's frightening to feel alone in this world, to feel left behind in some kind of way. And there are thousands of people, millions of people in this world right now that are frightened and lonely. Now, I don't think that Harry and Meghan, the Prince and the whatever you want to call her, whatever, Sussex, okay. I think they're full of it, but anyway, I don't want to say that. But you know what I feel sorry for Meghan about? She runs around jogging, wearing crystals on her neck to protect her. Isn't that a shame? Isn't that a shame? Doesn't somebody like that need to know about a God who saves you instead of rocks and crystals that you wear around your neck to protect you? She is frightened. There are lots of frightened people who aren't nearly as obnoxious as she is, but they're frightened. They're seeking the unknown in a frightening way. And then the unknown can be exciting to some people. I was never frightened of God. I was just excited. I wanted to know more. I wanted to figure out what God can do. There's a preacher down in Destrehan named Jesse Duplantis, okay? Whether you think Jesse's a phony or he's real, I don't really care. But Jesse's always excited, okay? He was excited when he was selling stuff, all the field parts on the Harvey Canal. He's excited today now that he's selling Jesus and all of this stuff. He was excited, and he is excited. We need to be excited about talking about God. I need to say, hey, I don't care what you believe. You can take those crystals off your neck, and if you'll follow God, that I know through Jesus Christ, your life will change in an unbelievable way. You can get rid of all kinds of problems you have. You can move forward, and it'll be good. And then there's a third thing about the unknown that's challenging. The unknown is challenging. To learn about something you've never learned about before is challenging. Something you've never known before. A few years ago, there was a project, a nonprofit organization called Mars One. Mars One was out of Holland, and what they said is, we're going to take a space flight to Mars, and we're going to establish a colony on Mars, but it's a one-way trip. Well, that's what they said. It's a one-way trip. But we'll get you there, you establish your colony, and somebody asked the guy who was running it, says, well, what is going to happen when they get to Mars? What if somebody dies? He said, well, somebody is going to die, and the citizens of Mars can do their own crematoriums and all of this stuff, and it didn't sound too good. But guess what? They put it out on Monday, offering people to have this adventure. And 2 weeks later, they had 10,000 emails wanting to go. The unknown is exciting. It's challenging. They want to go out and see it. Now, as you don't know, they were supposed to launch in 2022 and land in 2023. Well, they never made it off the ground, and it wasn't exactly a scam, but it kind of failed anyway. It didn't get off the ground. I guess Elon Musk wouldn't loan them a rocket or something like that. I have no idea. But anyway, 10,000 people were interested. The unknown is frightening, it's exciting, it's challenging. So you want to meet people where they are, and then you're talking about God and only God. And then the lesson 3 I would give you is, there comes a time when you have to just come right out and say it. The verses I read for this are this. Since we are God's offspring, we ought not to think about the deity as like gold, silver, or stone, an image formed by the art and imagination of mortals. While God has overlooked the times of human ignorance, now he commands all people everywhere to repent, because he has fixed a day on which he will have the world judged in righteousness by a man whom he appointed And of this he has given assurance by raising him from the dead. He told them all, that's where they are, talking about God, and then he finally says, I got to get to the point now. I got to get to the point. I've got to tell it like it is. I've got to stop beating around the bush. I need to come right out and say it. See, concrete answers to people's questions cure up confusion. If people ask me, did Jesus rise from the dead? I say, yeah, he did. If they ask me, did he conquer sin? I said, yeah. If you ask me, did he raise Lazarus from the dead? Yes. If you ask me if I believe in the miracles of the Bible? Yes, I do. And then they can make a decision. They know where this guy stands. He doesn't give them confusion. And concrete answers create security. Because I do believe in the stories of the Bible. Because I do believe in the teachings of the Bible. I have security in life that allows me to go forward no matter what comes out around me. And concrete answers also clear up debate. They clear up debate because we make up our mind and that's where we're standing. Does that mean that there can be people in church that have different answers to the same question? Yeah, they can. They really can. But at least they have a concrete answer. At least they have something that they can stand with. We need to come right out and say it. There's a story that comes from the early part of the 20th century about a logging company in Oregon that used to cut logs in a particular place and then go downstream in the river. But there were 3 sawmills at the bottom of the river, and the sawmills bought the logs. And you know how they knew which ones their logs? They imprinted on the side of the logs the name of the company, the loggers that belonged to them, that sawmill. Well, people got kind of smart along the way, and they decided, we can have our own sawmill. You know how we can have this? We can grab the log out of the river, we can cut the end off of it and keep the rest of the log and send it to our sawmill. And this became a common practice. And there was a Methodist pastor who was pastor of the church in a town at the bottom of the hill there, or the mountain there. And he thought, this is bad. They shouldn't be doing this. So he preached a sermon one Sunday, thou shalt not steal. And he preached it, and he was an old-fashioned Baptist. He could stomp and holler and all this. Believe it or not, it wasn't a Baptist that was stomping and hollering in the early 20th century. It was a Methodist. And he could do all of that stuff. And at the end of the service, everybody shook his hand and told him, good sermon. And he's thinking, oh, they didn't get it. So he said, I got to make them know they're not supposed to steal the law. So he titled next week's sermon, thou shalt not cut the ends off of other people's logs. They got it. Now sometimes we got to get cut to the chase. I believe that if we get a relationship with somebody, if we meet them where they are, and then we want to share Jesus Christ with them, and they say, is this the way to be saved? You have to say yes. You have to say yes. You don't have to open up all the options and discuss all the philosophy. There'll be plenty of time later for that person to discuss religious philosophy. Believe me, I have spent 40 years discussing religious philosophy with my colleagues, okay? Sometimes I get plenty enough of it. But when you got somebody who's searching and hungering for the unknown, for the God, meet them where they are, tell them about God, and close the deal. Just get concrete about it. That's how to build a church. And that's how to live your life, too. I believe you can improve your life if you do the same thing yourself. If you have some doubt, just let it go. Learn to endorse and to embrace the unknown. To embrace ambiguity in life, the things you cannot prove, the things you cannot totally understand. I don't totally understand heaven. I don't totally understand what's going to happen to me after I die. I know I'm going to be with God, going to be with the Lord. That's what I know, and that's enough for me. I don't have to have all the answers, and I could never give them to anyone. So I hope in the future, as we attempt to build a church the way we can, we'll just have that simple formula for sharing, as Paul did it with the Athenians, in the midst of everything everybody wanted, because we certainly live in a world where people are searching for God, all kinds of places. So we'll find it. Let's help them. Let's pray. Lord God, we come to you now, and in the midst of confusion that lives amongst us, and the confusion that plagues our world and our country, help us to be able to share who you are and what your approach is, what your love for people is, and help us to be able to be the messengers of this. We ask this in Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Our closing hymn is hymn number 98, To God Be the Glory. What a good song to have in light of what I've tried to say. Hymn number 98, To God Be the Glory. Won't we please all stand?